The auction hall on station smelled of ozone and desperation. Kevin stood at the back, his prosthetic left arm hidden beneath a worn military jacket that had seen better decades. The neural interface port behind his ear throbbed, a phantom pain that doctors said was psychosomatic, a remnant of his years commanding the Fourth Fleet during the Convergence Wars. He shouldn't be here. His pension barely covered the rent on his HAB unit, and the medications that kept his cybernetic implants from rejecting cost more each month. But the message board posting had haunted him for 3 sleepless nights. Draconis stellaris hatchlings. Quarantine clearance failed. Scheduled for thermal disposal. Final auction before termination. Kevin pushed through the crowd of curiosity seekers and black market geneticists. On the stage, behind reinforced transparasteel, were 12 incubation pods. Each contained a creature no larger than a house cat, their scales shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with their rapid heartbeats. Lot 7 Alpha, the auctioneer droned, his voice modulated through a voice box that stripped all emotion. Draconis stellaris, genetic origin, Epsilon Eridani system, age, 4 standard months. Note: this specimen shows signs of chromatic deficiency syndrome, wings underdeveloped. Flame sacs produce only 62% of normal thermal output. The dragon baby in question pressed against the pod's wall. Her scales were a dull copper where they should have been brilliant crimson. One wing hung at an odd angle, the membrane torn and badly healed. But her eyes, those ancient, intelligent eyes, locked onto Kevin's with an intensity that struck him like a railgun round to the chest. Starting bid, 500 credits, the auctioneer announced. Silence. Kevin checked his account balance. His entire savings, 4,237 credits. It was supposed to last him 6 months. After that, he didn't like to think about after that. Any bids? The auctioneer's tone suggested he already knew the answer. Reminder: failed quarantine specimens will be processed at 600 tomorrow. All sales final. No refunds, no returns. The dragon baby, Kevin found himself thinking of her as female, though he had no basis for that assumption, tilted her head. A small sound escaped her, something between a chirp and a whimper. The universal translator in his ear rendered it as afraid, alone, cold. 500 credits, Kevin heard himself say. Every head in the room turned. The auctioneer paused, clearly surprised anyone had bid at all. We have 500, do I hear 6? More silence. The other bidders, such as they were, looked at Kevin like he'd just volunteered to juggle antimatter. Sold to the gentleman in the back. Please proceed to processing. 2 hours later, Kevin sat in his HAB unit with an incubation pod taking up half his living space and his bank account reading 3,981 credits. The pod hummed softly, maintaining the precise temperature and atmospheric composition required for Draconis stellaris development. He'd named her Elsa. The neural translator had picked up something from her distress calls that sounded like Elza, though he suspected he was projecting. Dragons from Epsilon Eridani didn't have names, not in any sense humans understood. They communicated through quantum-entangled neurons, their thoughts operating on principles that made human consciousness look like binary code. Elsa pressed against the pod's wall, watching him with those golden eyes. Kevin pulled up the care documentation on his wrist display. His heart sank with each line. Thermal environment, 34360 Kelvin. Atmospheric composition, nitrogen 72%, oxygen 21%, carbon dioxide 4%, trace elements. Diet, synthesized protein matrix with rare earth mineral supplementation. Medical care, monthly scans, quarterly genetic stability treatments. He ran the calculations. Even with the cheapest suppliers, the most basic care would cost him 2,000 credits per month. He had maybe 2 months before he'd be choosing between feeding Elsa and feeding himself. What was I thinking? He muttered. Elsa chirped. The translator rendered it as gratitude, warmth, safe. Kevin felt something in his chest crack. During the war, he'd commanded 7,000 personnel. He'd made decisions that sent people to their deaths. He'd watched colonies burn and made the calculations that determined which civilians could be evacuated and which would be left behind. The weight of those choices had crushed something inside him, something that all the therapy and medications couldn't restore. But this one small creature, this reject that nobody wanted, looked at him like he was worth something. "Yeah," he said softly, "you're safe now." The first month was harder than any combat operation Kevin had ever led. The protein synthesizer broke down 3 times. Each repair cost credits he didn't have, forcing him to sell his military commendations, his dress uniform, even the antique watch his grandfather had given him. The watch alone had been worth 1,500 credits, 3 weeks of Elsa's care. The medical scans revealed the full extent of her problems. Chromatic deficiency syndrome was just the beginning. Her left wing had been broken in the egg, probably during rough handling. Her flame sacs were underdeveloped, meaning she'd never be able to achieve the plasma state combustion that her species was famous for. Worst of all, her quantum neural network, the biological computer that gave dragons their legendary intelligence, was operating at only 40% efficiency. "She'll never fly properly," Dr. Yuki Chen told him during the first checkup. The xenobiologist looked at Kevin with something between pity and confusion. "Her cognitive development will plateau below baseline. She'll never achieve the hive-mind connection that makes Draconis stellaris so valuable for deep space navigation. I'm sorry, Kevin, but you bought a defective product." "She's not a product," Kevin said quietly. "She's alive." Dr. Chen shrugged. "That's one perspective, but practically speaking, you've invested in a creature that will require lifelong care and provide no economic return. The ethical disposal protocols exist for a reason." After the doctor left, Kevin sat beside Elsa's pod. She'd grown to the size of a medium dog, her copper scales beginning to show hints of deeper color at their edges. She pressed her nose against the transparasteel, leaving small clouds of condensation. "Defective," Kevin repeated. He looked at his prosthetic arm, felt the port behind his ear where military-grade hardware interfaced with his nervous system. During the war, he'd taken a plasma burst that should have killed him. Instead, it had left him rebuilt, augmented, and eventually discarded when the treaties were signed, and veterans like him became inconvenient reminders of a conflict everyone wanted to forget. He understood exactly what it meant to be considered defective. By the 3rd month, Kevin had sold everything he owned except his military jacket and a single photograph of his crew from the 4th Fleet. His account balance hovered at 200 credits. The rent was due in a week. He'd applied for 17 jobs. Nobody wanted to hire a 53-year-old veteran whose neural implants were 2 generations out of date and whose psychological profile was flagged with PTSD markers. The few interviews he'd gotten ended when potential employers saw him check the time on his wrist display, the nervous habit of someone tracking medication schedules. Elsa had outgrown the incubation pod. She now had free run of the HAB unit, though free run was a generous description. Her damaged wing meant she couldn't fly, could barely glide. She'd hop from the sleeping platform to the counter, from the counter to Kevin's chair, always moving with a lopsided grace that was somehow endearing. She'd started trying to speak. Dragons didn't have vocal cords in the human sense, but they could modulate their flame breath to produce sounds. Elsa's underdeveloped flame sacs meant her voice came out as soft chirps and whistles, like a broken flute. "Kevin," she managed one evening, the sounds carefully shaped. "Kevin's sad." He looked up from the eviction notice on his display. "Yeah, buddy, I'm sad." She hopped across the room, hop, skip, slide with that broken wing, and pressed her head against his leg. The scales were warm, almost hot, and he could feel the vibration of her quantum neural network trying to establish the empathic bond that dragons used with their kind. It wasn't supposed to work with humans. The biological architecture was too different, the consciousness patterns incompatible. But Kevin felt it anyway, a warmth that wasn't physical, a sense of fierce loyalty and gratitude that transcended language. In that moment, he understood what Elsa was trying to say. Together. Pack. Safe. Yeah, he whispered, stroking her scarred wing. Together. The solution came from an unexpected source. Kevin had posted his situation on veterans' forums, not looking for handouts but for advice. Maybe someone knew of cheaper care alternatives or a way to stretch his credits further. He'd been prepared for silence or platitudes. Instead, his inbox exploded. Veterans from across the system reached out. Some sent credits, 10 here, 50 there. Others offered expertise, a former medical officer who could source generic medication at cost, an engineer who could repair the protein synthesizer remotely, a logistics specialist who knew suppliers that would trade goods instead of demanding credits. "We take care of our own," one message read. "And anyone you're willing to spend your last credit on is one of our own." Within 2 weeks, a support network had materialized. Not enough to make Kevin wealthy, but enough to keep him and Elsa fed, housed, and cared for. The veterans community had claimed them both. More than that, Elsa's story had spread. A human veteran spending everything to save a reject dragon captured something in the collective imagination. News services picked it up. Xenobiologists started debating dragon rights. Animal welfare activists pointed to Elsa as proof that the disposal protocols were barbaric. The other 11 dragons from that auction block, all scheduled for termination. The story of Lot 7 Alpha, of Elsa, made people ask uncomfortable questions about the other lots. A fund was established. Within a month, all 11 were purchased by the Veterans Network and placed in caring homes. The quarantine protocols were challenged in court. The regulations changed. One small dragon, one aging veteran, and thousands of people who decided that defective was just another word for worth fighting for. 6 months later, Elsa perched on the railing of the observation deck, her wings spread wide. The damaged left wing would never fully heal, but months of careful exercise and Dr. Chen's donated physical therapy protocols had given her enough strength to glide short distances. She'd never be a navigation dragon, would never join the quantum hive mind in guiding ships through hyperspace, but she'd found her own purpose. Kevin watched as a group of children approached, their faces bright with excitement. This had become their routine. Twice a week, they visited the Veterans Center and Elsa performed for the kids. She'd hop and glide, she'd produce small gouts of flame, never quite reaching plasma state but impressive enough, and she'd let the children pet her copper scales. "Is she really a reject?" one child asked. "She's really special," Kevin corrected gently. "She just needed someone to see it." Elsa chirped. Her voice was stronger now, almost musical, and hopped to Kevin's shoulder. The weight was considerable. She'd grown to nearly 60 pounds. But his prosthetic arm held steady, and she balanced there with the ease of long practice. Content, her quantum neural network whispered into his consciousness. Home, pack, purpose. Yeah, Kevin agreed, looking out at the stars beyond the station's viewport. Purpose. He'd spent his savings, sold his possessions, and risked everything for a creature the universe had deemed worthless. And in return, Elsa had given him what no therapy, no medication, no pension could provide: a reason to keep going. Sometimes the most valuable things in the universe were the ones nobody else wanted. Sometimes being defective just meant you were perfectly suited for a purpose no one else could imagine. And sometimes, Kevin thought as Elsa nuzzled his cheek with her scarred snout, saving one life meant saving two. And